seriously doing that right now?
I never thought serving coffee would change my life forever. One moment, I was wiping tables at Milano's cafe. The next, a designer heel slammed into my pregnant belly so hard I saw stars. As I lay bleeding on that cafe floor, I heard her laugh. But she made one fatal mistake. She didn't know I had a guardian angel watching. What you're about to hear is the most shocking revenge story I've ever lived through. Before we begin, smash that subscribe button because this tale has more twists than a roller coaster, and you won't want to miss a single second. Hit the notification bell, and let me take you back to the day my life changed forever. My name is Amara, and 7 months ago, I was standing at the edge of a cliff, not literally, but financially, emotionally, and physically. I was 7 months pregnant with my first child, a baby girl we'd already named Hope. The name felt like a prayer back then, because Hope was all we had left. My husband, Daniel, had lost his factory job 3 months earlier. When the plant shut down without warning, bills were piling up on our kitchen table like a mountain we couldn't climb. But the worst part? The doctors had discovered that my baby had a heart condition. She would need surgery within days of being born, and the medical bills were already approaching numbers that made my head spin. $400,000. How do people like us even begin to imagine that kind of money? So I worked double shifts at Milano's cafe. Despite my swollen feet that felt like balloons about to pop, I worked through the backaches that made me want to cry every time I bent down. I worked through my mother-in-law's constant phone calls, telling me I was a terrible mother for risking my baby's health. "What kind of woman puts money before her child?" she'd say, as if I had any choice. As if I wasn't doing this precisely because I loved my child more than anything in this world. Every night, I'd come home and collapse on our worn-out couch, placing my hands on my belly, feeling Hope kick against my palms. "I'm doing this for you, baby," I'd whisper. "Just hold on a little longer. Mama's going to save you." Milano's was one of those upscale cafes where the coffee costs more than most people's lunch. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, velvet chairs. It catered to the kind of people who wore watches worth more than my yearly salary. I didn't belong there, not really, but the tips were good when customers felt generous, and I needed every penny. My manager, Tony, was a decent guy, always asking if I needed to sit down, offering me the easier tables. But even he was under pressure. The cafe had recently been bought by Mr. Hastings, a cold businessman who cared only about profit and reputation. "One complaint from the wrong person, and you're all replaceable," he'd told us during a staff meeting, his eyes sweeping over us like we were insects. That morning started like any other. My coworker Carmen helped me tie my apron around my swollen belly, joking that we'd need extra fabric soon. "Girl, you should be at home with your feet up," she said, genuine worry in her eyes. I smiled, but we both knew I couldn't afford that luxury. The morning rush had just ended when she walked in. Vanessa Sterling. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew her type immediately. She swept into Milano's like a hurricane in designer clothing, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Diamonds glittered at her ears, her throat, her wrists. Her handbag probably cost more than my car. She was on her phone, her voice sharp and cutting as she berated someone about flower arrangements for a charity event. "I don't care if the orchids are expensive. I want perfection." She snapped her perfectly manicured fingers at me without even looking. "You, I need a table, now." The table she pointed to was reserved for another customer, but before I could explain, she'd already sat down. Tossing her bag onto the chair like she owned the place, Tony caught my eye from across the room and gave me a helpless shrug. The message was clear: don't make waves, give her what she wants. I approached with my notepad, my professional smile firmly in place, despite the way my baby was pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. "Good morning, ma'am. What can I get for you today?" Vanessa didn't look up from her phone. "Cappuccino, extra foam, not too hot, not too cold, exactly 140 degrees. Can you manage that, or is that too complicated for you?" The words stung, but I swallowed my pride. "Of course, ma'am. I'll have that right out. I brought her the cappuccino, made exactly to her specifications by our barista who'd worked at Milano's for 15 years. Vanessa took one sip and her face twisted like I'd served her poison. This is disgusting. Are you people completely incompetent? She shoved the cup toward me so violently that hot coffee splashed across my uniform, burning my skin through the thin fabric. I gasped, but tried to maintain composure. I'm so sorry, ma'am. Let me make you another one. The second cappuccino met the same fate. Too hot! Are you trying to burn me? She shrieked, though she hadn't even touched the cup, just waved her hand over it dramatically. The third attempt was apparently too cold. By this point, other customers were watching, their conversations dying down as they witnessed this spectacle. An elderly woman at the next table leaned toward her companion and whispered, "This is cruel." But no one intervened. No one ever does. Then Vanessa's eyes landed on my belly, really seeing it for the first time. Her lip curled in disgust. Oh God, they let pregnant cows work here? How desperate is this place? The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my face neutral. I'd dealt with rude customers before. I could handle this. I had to handle this. My baby needed me to handle this. But Vanessa wasn't done. She deliberately dropped her fork onto the floor and pointed at it. "Pick it up." It wasn't a request. It was a command, the way you'd speak to a dog. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation as I slowly bent down, my pregnant belly making the simple task nearly impossible. My back screamed in protest. Hope pressed against my lungs, making it hard to catch my breath. Behind me, I heard Vanessa laugh, a cold, tinkling sound. Look at you, waddling like a penguin. Absolutely pathetic. As I struggled to stand back up, gripping the table for support, the elderly woman from before spoke up. "Excuse me, but this is completely unacceptable. You should be ashamed of yourself." Vanessa's head whipped toward her with the speed of a snake, striking, "Mind your business, you old hag. Nobody asked for your opinion." The cafe went even quieter. Even the espresso machine seemed to stop hissing. I brought Vanessa's food order, my hands trembling slightly. I just wanted this shift to end. I wanted to go home, put my feet up, and feel my baby kick, reminding me why I endured days like this. But as I approached the table, Vanessa suddenly shifted her chair backward without warning. I stumbled, trying to catch my balance, and a tiny splash of soup landed on the table. Not on her, not on her dress, just on the table. Vanessa exploded. She shot to her feet, her chair screeching against the marble floor. "You ruined my designer dress," she screamed, though there wasn't a single drop on her clothing. "You clumsy, worthless piece of trash." I stepped back instinctively, my hands moving to protect my belly. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. There's nothing on your dress. Let me just clean the table." "Sorry? Sorry?" Her face was red now, contorted with a rage that seemed disproportionate to a splash of soup that hadn't even touched her. "Do you know how much this dress costs? More than your pathetic life is worth." I kept backing away, my heart pounding. Something in her eyes scared me. There was a darkness there, a cruelty that went beyond simple rudeness. "Ma'am, please, I apologize. Let me get my manager." "Oh, you think you're special because you're pregnant?" Vanessa's voice dropped to something low and dangerous. She took a step toward me, and I took another step back. "Let me tell you something about babies." She never finished that sentence. Instead, without any warning, Vanessa lifted her leg and kicked me. Her Louboutin heel, sharp and hard, slammed directly into my pregnant belly with a force that knocked the air from my lungs. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It radiated from the point of impact like an explosion, white-hot and all-consuming. I heard myself scream, a sound I didn't recognize as my own voice. My legs gave out and I collapsed, my hands clutching my stomach as I hit the hard marble floor. Blood. There was blood seeping through my uniform. I could feel the wetness, warm and terrifying. "My baby," I gasped, tears streaming down my face. "Please, please, my baby." The cafe erupted into chaos around me. Chairs scraped, people shouted, someone was crying. But through it all, I heard Vanessa's voice, cold and clear. "Maybe this will teach you to know your place." Carmen rushed to my side, screaming for someone to call 911. She pressed her apron against my stomach, trying to stop the bleeding, her own face wet with tears. "Hold on, Amara, hold on. Help is coming." I looked up at Vanessa through my blurred vision. She was standing over me, not a trace of remorse on her perfect face. When I reached out instinctively, not to grab her, just a reflexive gesture of pain, she kicked my hand away from her shoe. "Don't touch me with your filthy hands." Then she pulled a $100 bill from her wallet and threw it at my face. It fluttered down, landing in the pool of blood spreading beneath me. "Here's your tip," she said. "Buy a new baby." I think that's when I realized I might die. Not from the physical injury, though that was bad enough, but from the sheer crushing weight of the cruelty I'd just experienced. How could another human being do this? How could someone be so devoid of basic compassion? My baby was dying inside me, and this woman was making jokes, but then I heard a sound that cut through everything else. The sound of a newspaper hitting the floor. I turned my head, my vision swimming, and saw a man standing up from the corner booth. He'd been there the whole time, I realized, sitting quietly with his laptop and coffee, just another customer. Except his face was completely drained of color. His hands were shaking. A coffee cup lay shattered at his feet where he'd apparently dropped it, but he didn't seem to notice. He was staring at Vanessa with an expression I couldn't quite read. Horror, yes. Disgust, absolutely. But there was something else there, too. Recognition. And something that looked almost like betrayal. The man walked toward us with slow, deliberate steps. He moved like someone in a dream or a nightmare. Every eye in the cafe turned to him. There was something in his bearing, some quality of authority or power that made even Vanessa pause in her tirade against Tony, who'd rushed over to try to manage the situation. "I'm suing this establishment," Vanessa was shrieking. "I'm calling my lawyer. My husband will destroy this place. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my husband is?" The man stopped a few feet away from her. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, almost conversational, but it carried through the silent cafe like a judge pronouncing sentence. "Will he now?" Vanessa froze. For the first time since she'd walked into Milano's, she looked uncertain. She turned slowly, and when she saw the man, her face went from flushed red to paper white in an instant. "Chris," her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Darling, what are you doing here?" "Don't," the single word cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare darling me." The man, Chris apparently, moved past Vanessa like she didn't exist and knelt beside me. His hands were gentle as he checked my pulse, his eyes full of concern. "Someone call an ambulance right now," he ordered, his voice finally rising. Then, softer to me, "Hold on. You're going to be okay. Both of you are going to be okay." Through my pain-fogged mind, I wondered why this stranger cared so much, why he looked at me with such fierce protectiveness. Vanessa tried to touch his arm, her voice taking on a wheedling, manipulative tone. "Chris, sweetheart, you don't understand. This clumsy waitress ruined my dress, and she—" Christopher jerked his arm away from her like her touch burned. He stood up and turned to face her, and the look on his face made even Vanessa step back. He pulled out his phone and started tapping at the screen. "I have everything, Vanessa. Everything." He turned the phone toward her. Even from the floor, I could see her face reflected in the screen's glow, and I watched her expression change from confusion to understanding to pure terror. "These are screenshots of your messages with Bradley, your affair partner." "My business partner." His voice was clinical now, like a doctor listing symptoms. "These are bank statements showing how you've been systematically stealing from our company accounts $2.3 million over the last 18 months. He swiped to another screen. "These are photos the private investigator took of you meeting Bradley at various hotels, 23 separate occasions." Vanessa's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You were spying on me?" The indignation in her voice would have been funny if the situation weren't so dire. Christopher's laugh was bitter. "I was protecting myself from a monster. But I never imagined—" His voice broke. I never imagined you'd go this far. I thought you were just greedy, just unfaithful. But this? He gestured to me, still bleeding on the floor. This is evil. That's when Vanessa's mask finally cracked completely. The sophisticated socialite disappeared, replaced by something desperate and ugly. She lunged at Christopher, her perfectly manicured nails reaching for his face. You can't divorce me. The prenup protects me. My lawyers will bury you. Christopher caught her wrists, holding her away from him effortlessly. His smile was cold, almost pitying. The prenup is void if you commit a felony, Vanessa. Assault and battery on a pregnant woman? That's a felony theft over $1 million? Also a felony. Adultery causing intentional emotional distress? That's grounds for an at-fault divorce that voids any prenuptial agreements. He released her wrists and she stumbled backward. You've been so busy thinking you're smarter than everyone else that you forgot I'm actually a lawyer. The realization dawned on Vanessa's face like a slow-motion catastrophe. She'd trapped herself. Every cruel action, every calculated step of her affair, every stolen dollar, it had all been building to this moment, and she'd added assault to the list, right in front of dozens of witnesses. She started screaming then, a sound of pure rage and frustration. She grabbed plates from a nearby table and threw them, crystal glasses shattering against the walls. That pregnant bitch seduced you, didn't she? She shrieked. You're choosing her over me? The sirens outside were the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Police officers and paramedics rushed in, and suddenly there were hands helping me, voices telling me to stay awake, to keep breathing. An oxygen mask covered my face. Someone was starting an IV in my arm. Through it all, I felt Christopher's hand holding mine. Stay with me, he kept saying. Don't give up. Please don't give up. Officer Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes, began taking statements. The witnesses came forward one by one. The elderly woman I'd tried to defend showed the video she'd recorded on her phone. I've been recording since she started verbally abusing this poor girl, she explained. A teenager in the corner spoke up. I got it on TikTok. It's already gone viral. 50,000 views and climbing. I watched as Vanessa's face cycled through emotions, panic, rage, disbelief, and finally, a dawning horror as she realized the full scope of what she'd done, not just in terms of the law, but in terms of her reputation, her social standing, everything she valued. When Officer Rodriguez moved to handcuff her, Vanessa tried to run. She actually tried to bolt for the door in her designer heels, but another officer blocked her path. Ma'am, you need to come with us. You're under arrest for aggravated assault and battery on a pregnant woman. Do you know who I am? Vanessa's voice was shrill now, all sophistication gone. Do you know who my family is? My father will have your badge. Christopher spoke up then, his voice heavy with finality. Officer, I'm also pressing charges for theft and embezzlement. I have all the documentation you'll need. Vanessa's head whipped toward him, betrayal written across her face. You're really doing this? You're really choosing to destroy me? No, Christopher said quietly. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. As the paramedics loaded me onto the stretcher, Christopher walked beside me. Still holding my hand, I tried to ask him why he cared so much about a waitress he didn't even know, but the pain and shock were pulling me under. Just before they lifted me into the ambulance, Christopher leaned close. You're going to be okay, he promised. Then he said something strange. You remind me of someone I loved very much. His voice cracked, someone I couldn't save. I must have passed out then because the next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital room filled with the sounds of machines beeping and the smell of antiseptic. Daniel was there, his face swollen from crying. The baby, I croaked. Is she... They did an emergency C-section, Daniel said, his voice shaking. She's alive, Amara. Our hope is alive, but she's in critical condition. The kick caused placental abruption. She's in the NICU, hooked up to machines, fighting for every breath. He broke down then, his head on my shoulder. They said if we'd gotten here even 10 minutes later. The days that followed were a blur of surgery and recovery, of sitting beside an incubator watching the tiny baby girl we'd named Hope fight for her life. She was so small, barely 4 pounds, covered in tubes and wires. The heart condition the doctors had warned us about required immediate surgery, and the cost was astronomical. I remember lying in my hospital bed, calculating numbers that didn't add up, wondering how we'd ever pay for any of this. That's when Christopher appeared in my doorway. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. "How is she?" he asked quietly. "How's Hope?" I told him the truth, that she was fighting, but the medical bills were already over $400,000 and climbing, that we'd lose our house, our car, everything, and it still wouldn't be enough. I told him because I was too tired to lie, too broken to pretend I had any pride left. Christopher pulled up a chair and sat beside my bed. "I'm going to tell you something," he said. "Something I haven't told anyone in years." He pulled out his wallet and showed me an old, worn photograph. It was of a young woman in a waitress uniform, smiling at the camera. She looked tired but happy, and there was something familiar about her face. "That's my mother," Christopher said. "Her name was Grace. She worked 3 jobs to keep me fed after my father abandoned us. She was a waitress at a diner downtown, worked herself to exhaustion every single day." His voice grew thick with emotion. "When I was 8 years old, she collapsed at work, massive stroke. By the time they got her to the hospital, it was too late." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You remind me of her. Your strength, your dignity, the way you kept your composure even when Vanessa was torturing you, when I saw what she did, when I saw you fall." He couldn't finish the sentence. I stared at the photograph, and something clicked in my memory. "Grace," I whispered. "Grace Morrison. She trained me when I first started waitressing 10 years ago before she—" I couldn't finish either. "She was the kindest person I ever met. She used to tell me stories about her son, about Christopher. How brilliant he was, how proud she was that he'd gotten into law school." Christopher's face crumpled. "She talked about me?" "All the time," I said, crying now too. "She said you were her whole world, that everything she did was to give you a better life." I reached out and took his hand. "She made me promise something before she died. She made me promise that if I ever met you, I'd tell you." I swallowed hard. "She said she was proud, so proud, and that her only regret was leaving you too soon." We sat there crying together, 2 strangers connected by the memory of a woman who'd shown both of us what real strength looked like. Finally, Christopher wiped his eyes and straightened. "I couldn't save my mother," he said, "but I can save you. I can save Hope, and I'm going to make sure Vanessa pays for what she did, not just legally, but in every way that matters to someone like her." And he did. Over the next 3 months, while Hope fought her way back to health, while I recovered from the trauma of that day, Christopher systematically dismantled Vanessa's entire life. He froze all of her bank accounts. He filed for divorce with overwhelming evidence of her crimes. He pressed criminal charges for assault, attempted murder of an unborn child, and grand theft. He contacted the media, and the story exploded across every news outlet. Socialite kicks pregnant waitress became a viral sensation. The hashtag #JusticeForAmara trended worldwide. Vanessa's charity friends abandoned her. Her mother, a society matriarch, publicly disowned her. Her affair partner, Bradley, fired her from the side business she'd been helping him run, stating she was too toxic for our brand. Every door in her gilded world slammed shut, one after another. The trial was brutal. I had to testify, had to relive that day in excruciating detail. But I also got to watch as witness after witness took the stand, the elderly woman with her video, the teenager whose TikTok had been viewed millions of times, Carmen, who'd held me while I bled, even Tony, my manager, who admitted he'd been too afraid of losing his job to defend me earlier. Vanessa was sentenced to 5 years in prison for aggravated assault and battery, an additional 3 years for the theft. In the civil suit, I was awarded $3.2 million in damages. Her divorce left her with nothing. Christopher's lawyers had ensured that every clause in the prenup that could work against her did. She'd walked into Milano's that morning as a wealthy, powerful socialite. She walked out of the courthouse as a convicted felon with nothing to her name. But the real victory wasn't Vanessa's destruction. It was what came after Hope survived. My beautiful, strong baby girl had her heart surgery and thrived. Christopher paid every medical bill, all $450,000, without blinking. He set up a trust fund for Hope's future. $2 million that would ensure she'd never want for anything. He helped Daniel get a better job with one of his business partners, and he created the Grace Morrison Foundation, dedicated to helping working mothers and pregnant women who found themselves in desperate situations like I'd been in. I used part of the settlement money to open my own cafe, a place where single mothers could work flexible hours, where pregnant women would be treated with dignity and respect, where no one would ever be kicked for being human. Today, 3 months after that terrible day, I stood in my cafe, holding Hope in my arms. She'd grown so much, her eyes bright and alert, her little heart beating strong and steady. Christopher, who visited weekly and had become like family to us, was sitting at the corner table with his laptop, just like he'd been that day at Milano's. The bell above the door chimed and I looked up. My blood ran cold. Vanessa stood in the doorway. She'd been released on bail temporarily while her lawyers worked on an appeal. She looked nothing like the woman who'd terrorized me. Her hair was limp and unwashed. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by cheap jeans and a wrinkled shirt. Her face was hollow, aged beyond her years. The cafe went quiet. Every customer, every employee watched as Vanessa walked toward me. I held Hope a little tighter. Vanessa stopped a few feet away, her eyes on my baby. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "Please, I'm begging you. Drop the lawsuit. Drop the charges. I've lost everything. My reputation, my money, my family. Isn't that enough?" She looked at me with desperate eyes. "Please, isn't my suffering enough?" I looked at this woman who'd tried to kill my baby, who'd kicked me while I was down, literally, who'd shown not an ounce of compassion or humanity, and I thought about what justice really meant. "You didn't just kick me that day," I said quietly. "You kicked every struggling mother who's just trying to survive. You kicked every person who's ever been treated like they're less than human because they don't have money or power. You kicked Hope itself." I adjusted Hope in my arms, feeling her warm weight against my chest. "So, no, it's not enough. Justice is never enough until you truly understand what you've done, until you feel, in your soul, the weight of the pain you caused." Vanessa's face crumpled, and she turned and left. I watched her go, and I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not anger, just a quiet certainty that some scales had finally balanced. Christopher came over and gently touched Hope's tiny hand. "Your mother is the strongest person I've ever met," he told her, "besides my own mother, of course." He looked at me. Grace would be proud of both of us. And she would have been. Not because we'd destroyed someone, but because we'd built something beautiful from the ashes. My cafe thrived. We hired women who needed second chances, who needed flexible hours, who needed to know that someone believed in them. We became a community, a family of sorts. Every day, I watched mothers come in exhausted and leave with smiles, with tips that helped them buy groceries, with the dignity of honest work done well. The best revenge, I learned, isn't destruction. It's building something beautiful that your enemy can never touch. It's succeeding in spite of the cruelty. It's protecting others from experiencing what you experienced. Vanessa tried to kill my future. Instead, she gave me a reason to fight for it harder than I ever had before. Late at night, when I'm feeding Hope and she looks up at me with those wise baby eyes, I think about that day, about the kick that could have ended everything, about the stranger who turned out to be connected to me through the memory of a woman we both loved, about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to our greatest victories. I think about Grace Morrison, who worked herself to death for her son. And I think about how her legacy lived on, not just in Christopher, who used his power and wealth to help people instead of crushing them, but in me, in Hope, in every mother who walked through the doors of my cafe and found dignity instead of degradation. She kicked me to knock me down, but she forgot that mothers don't stay down. We rise, we fight, we protect, and we never ever forget. This is for every woman who's been kicked while she's down. This is for every person who's been treated as less than human. Your day will come too. Justice may be slow, but it's inevitable. Hold on to hope. Sometimes that's all it takes. That's my story. Raw, painful, but ultimately about triumph. If this moved you, hit that like button and subscribe because stories like this need to be told. Share this with any woman who needs to hear that she's stronger than she knows. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever witnessed cruelty like this? What would you have done? Your engagement helps YouTube show this to more people who need this message. Remember, you're never as powerless as someone wants you to believe. Until next time, stay strong, stay fierce, and never let anyone kick you down. This is Amara, signing off.